PG Farms, Mehgin Reynolds, owner-operator, and Monsieur Stéphane Bissaillon.
And Mr. Stéphane Bissaillon, we're told that he will be arriving a little late. When he arrives, he'll be able to be seated at the table.
Have an opening statement for up to 6 minutes. Thank you.
Sure. So hi everybody, my name is Sean Stanford. I farm, just hold on a second. I'm a 34-year-old grain farmer from southern Alberta. I farm there with my wife and our 2 young children. I'd like to just begin by telling you that I'm not weak or I'm not a lesser of a man, I'm just a little sick. So I suffer from anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. I was diagnosed nearly 2 years ago and have been on multiple medications and seen multiple therapists to help me with my conditions. While I may not be different from many Canadians, the industry that I work in makes these conditions a bit harder to deal with. There are actually many extra challenges that farmers and producers have to deal with that the general population does not. Farming is one of the few occupations that is highly dependent on weather. As you're well aware of, no one can control the weather. I can tell you it is quite stressful knowing that the biggest factor in your paycheck for the year is out of your hands. There are many farmers back home that have not finished harvest yet, and it is covered with snow. After a very, very dry summer and now a wet fall, emotions are running quite high. Farmers also spend many hours and days isolated on their land. I myself have gone days on end without seeing another person for the entire day. This gives your mind too much time to play tricks on itself, time to second guess yourself and think about if you are making the right decisions for your business. And it does not give you an opportunity to think about what's actually happening in the real world back home. You can get lonely out there and miss your family. Isolation also means less access to professional help, such as doctors, counselors, and psychologists. All 3 of these professions are integral to the proper recovery of someone suffering from mental health conditions. There are multiple elements that experts say are required to keep a person healthy. Included in those are proper exercise, nutrition, relaxation time, and sleep. I can personally tell you it is nearly impossible to get all these elements in as a farmer during the busy season. Working 100 hours or more per week is not abnormal. Having a meal that does not come out of a lunchbox is also uncommon. And if you ever tried to do jumping jacks in a tractor, it's not that easy. Now the big questions. What resources are available and what is missing? Rural Canada has been shrinking. Our local hospital and doctor's office closed up many years ago. For any counseling or therapists, I need to travel about 30 miles. I know that it's a lot longer and further for many others. Then to actually get an appointment with some of these professionals, the wait can be many weeks. This is unacceptable. The cost of these services is also quite high. We need better and cheaper access to these health professionals. I had my first interaction with a counselor through my local fire department. I have volunteered there for 14 years, and that's where my PTSD stems from. When I asked my fire chief to find me some help, there was already a set of resources lined up to help me. Emergency services seems to have the proper channels in place already. As far as I know, there are no dedicated resources like these in place for farmers and agricultural producers. Many of the medications used to treat anxiety and depression can be quite expensive as well. Thankfully, I am able to afford blue cross coverage for my family, but this does not cover some of the medications required or prescribed. These medications need to be more affordable to everybody. I have learned a lot and made many connections using social media and the internet. Twitter has been a huge help for me to find many resources, links, and friends to help me through the tough times. Proper cellular service in rural Canada is detrimental for this reason. Contact with the outside world when you're isolated is more possible, so the use of smartphones and mobile internet has been a huge help for me. What else are we missing? What else haven't we thought of yet? Special conditions for ag producers may call for special solutions. Maybe a mental health app for smartphones or some kind to help diagnose issues or provide ideas to help out during rough periods. Perhaps teleconferencing or video conferencing with a therapist may help. Trying to stomp out the stigma of having a mental health condition is a huge hurdle to overcome, especially in agriculture. Many people, including myself, felt like mental health issues should be something that individuals should be able to handle themselves. Some producers have tried to beat down these walls of stigma and have faced a barrage of bullying and personal attacks for it, myself included. We need to come up with a way to tell people that they are also sick and need proper treatment, no different than a cold or a cut on your hand. We need to end the stigma. I hope that this has given you some insight into my personal thoughts on mental health issues facing agriculture. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Mr. Stanford. And now Ms. Reynolds for 6 minutes.
I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and had an 11-year career in the film industry before meeting my husband and moving to rural Saskatchewan. There, I became a grain farmer. It didn't take me long to figure out how challenging, stressful, and isolating farming can be. 2016 may have been my 4th crop year, but it was the first time I stood and watched while my crop, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, was destroyed in a 10-minute hailstorm. It was also the first time in my life that I felt like a complete failure. A failure as a farmer, a failure as a spouse, and a failure as a provider for my family. It was the first time, and sadly not the last, that I felt my only worth to my family was in my life insurance policy. I would love to sit here in front of you all today and say that things are better, to say that I'm the only one in Canadian agriculture who has ever felt this way, but to do so would be a lie. We are now struggling with our 3rd year in a row. Weather extremes that sabotage our ability to grow the bushels we need to make a profit, commodity prices that do not come close to covering our expenses, and transportation issues that inhibit our ability to pay our bills on time. I no longer know what it feels like to live without stress, and my husband now struggles with anxiety triggered by the stress of trying to farm and make ends meet, an anxiety that I have watched bring him sobbing to his knees. If you ask me in this moment if I hope that my girls would grow up wanting to take over our 4th generation farm, I would tell you that I would encourage them to do anything but become farmers. However, the stark reality is that if we continue down this path, there will not be a farm for them to take over one day. Right now, I'm sure you're thinking that we must be bad farmers, that there must be something wrong with our business plan. Because after all, the point of a business is balancing risk while trying to make a profit. Do you know that grain farmers in Canada have the 2nd highest cost of inputs? That means our seed treatment, our fertilizer, and the chemicals we need to grow our crops. We also cannot come close to growing the bushels that other countries grow thanks to our short growing season and dry climate. On an average year, the bushels I am able to produce on my fields do not cover my expenses, including my mortgage and my land rent. I need to work off-farm, not only to put food on my family's table, but to also subsidize my farm expenses. If I worked as a teacher, a nurse, a banker, or if I was still working in the film industry, I would not be required to hold a 2nd job to afford to do my 1st. You see, I cannot raise the price I sell my crops for in order to help cover the rising expenses associated with growing my crops. When I need to move grain to pay bills, I try to find the best contract possible, but ultimately have very little control over the price. I'm usually forced to sell at a time when prices are low from harvest pressure in order to cover bills that have been accumulating over the year. If a carbon tax is forced upon me, I also stand to add an additional $30,000 to my expense list as well. In February, I sat in a room full of 400 producers. We were tasked with standing up when a question asked applied to us. The first question was, have you ever lost a family member or friend to suicide? 90% of the room stood up, and that broke my heart. Farmers, not only in Canada but globally, are struggling. We're struggling with high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. We cannot speak out or admit that we are struggling because we are told to be strong. We're told to suck it up. We're told that we are not real farmers if we ask for help. If we seek treatment, we might be turned down for life insurance policies or watch our premiums skyrocket. Life insurance companies classify us as higher risk when taking care of ourselves and seeking help. We run on 3 to 5 hours of sleep during the busy seasons like seeding and harvest and go for weeks without seeing much of our families and children. We spend 15 hours plus a day in equipment cabs by ourselves. In isolation, we were running the numbers, worrying about our bills and getting further into our own heads. Sometimes we have our children with us as well, where we have to juggle farming because we don't have access to childcare. Often we are also volunteers in our communities as first responders who deal with being on scene for accidents and the deaths of our friends and community members. This summer, a friend posted that a farmer in her community had just died from suicide. I did not know the person, but I broke down sobbing at my kitchen table. When I took a moment to reflect as to why the death of someone I did not know upset me so much, I was forced to bring light to a fear that I do not want to dwell on. The fear that surges up when I cannot get a hold of my husband. The fear that just possibly he has given in to the nonstop stress and anxiety of trying to provide for our family and farm. The conversation is starting to change. Producers are starting to open up, but it is only a start. The stigma surrounding mental health in agriculture is still strong. We need support from each other, we need support from our communities, services from our healthcare systems, and most importantly, we need to be able to afford to farm without having to work off the farm. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk with you today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reynolds, for your testimony. Are you the first one, Ms. Reynolds?